I guess that the interesting was how do you think that the use of a sort of XR, AR and VR, the amount of work required to get it working actually means that it's worth using versus more low-tech styles of whatever you're working with?
In my own experience, when I have been working with augmented reality, it's very easier for the teachers to work with the different applications. In contrast, when we work with VR, the teachers put strange things because, according to Noah talk in his presentation, they don't know what type of software they need or what type of knowledge they need to develop the applications of these VR environments. Okay, then probably in my own experience, these are the main problems that we are suffering.
And so did you say that have you been able to find good solutions to those problems, or is it just sort of something you have to work around?
For example, when I went to a school to work with VR and head-mounted display application in this research project in Spain, when we arrived to the school, the different teachers put stranger things, okay, when we arrived with this type of tools, and their previous knowledge was about augmented reality, but they didn't know how to work with these tools and how to apply in the different activities of the autistic students, because in Spain, the main problem that we suffer to apply this type of technologies was how to include this type of exercises or this type of activities in the curriculum and in the activities of these autistic students. Probably this is the main problem that we are suffering in Spanish education when we work with this type of tool. In contrast with augmented reality, is easier, and the teachers try to create these activities and they are more motivated to work with augmented reality.
So it's interesting to say, like, clearly then it's almost more of an issue of just familiarity. You imagine that over time, suddenly the curriculum will move towards things that are more open to XR. Actually, you would hope.
Yes. For example, here in Spain, specifically in Valencian community, where I am from, in the schools, we have different levels of response of the students according to their needs. For example, level 1 of response here, what the center or what the school can do for these students. There are some type of documents in the organization of the school where appeared what type of measures can be developed for this student. After that, in the level 2 of response, what can be done in class for the different students. And the level 3 of response is more specific, for example, for autistic students, visual impairment students, what type of measures can be developed. In this case, for example, we can develop virtual reality activities or augmented reality activities. I think here in Spain, we have inclusive measures that are developing in all the schools, and this is a good philosophy, and the teachers are more motivated when we work with these inclusive measures and all this framework that has been developing in Spain during the last a few years. I think this type of measures here in Valencian community was implemented in the schools during the 5 years 2018 from 2022.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Tammy has got a question next.
Yes, so my question is following up to what Gonzalo and Elliot were talking about. I just wondered if anyone has any suggestions of what sorts of things we would need to do to make the research more accessible to autistic individuals.
I mean, so I think the key one is just the wider element of sort of the open access movement. I know that in the States, quite controversially now, that federal funding has a requirement for open access requirements, and I know that the funding bodies here in the UK also require non-academics to be able to access this stuff for free, which is a major development over the last little bit that will surely help it disseminate. But I think there's also an argument for just creating materials for people, especially in academic work, that is just not as full of jargon, is easy to understand, and is not just aimed at us in our ivory towers. And some of that comes down to having social media presences, or things on our websites that just normal people are able to read. I mean, so I appreciate that's not very specific, but just wider science access.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got any other questions for the panel about their talk specifically, or just VR and autism more generally?
So, I mean, if I can ask Noah a question, just if you could go into a bit more detail about what your videos actually were. I think on the your posters, it was a shuttle bus and a classroom, was it?
Sure. So this research took place at the University of Cincinnati, and in the College of Education, there is a program called Impact Innovation. It's a day program for autistic adults with the goals of providing vocational opportunities and community integration opportunities. And the University of Cincinnati also has a pretty robust shuttle system that takes people around the campus and the surrounding communities, and also kind of around town, upwards of about 40 minutes north to various satellite locations in the city. With the goal of trying to increase vocational opportunities, community integration, the shuttle system was seen as a way of hoping to promote those, I guess, goals. But the program did not have any kind of formalized shuttle training routine, and it was always done in like this very ad hoc, impromptu manner, like, oh, you need to learn how to ride a bus, let me go show you how to do it. Obviously, there were a lot of issues associated with this, and the Impact program also serves more associates with more significant comorbidities and challenges with autism. So there were a lot of issues, health and safety issues, traffic issues that came up, and it was determined that maybe a virtual reality system might be a good way of doing it. And we came up with like a 4-tiered approach to kind of providing the instruction. The first was a multimedia introduction to the skill. The second was a modeling of the skill through this SVVR app. The third was rehearse the skill in the fully immersive environment, and then it would go out onto campus and teach us what you were taught, with the goal of trying to promote generalization of those skills. Within the SVVR videos, we chunked it down into 4 sub videos. It was around like checking the schedule, where they would watch a video with taking place in the impact offices, learn what they need to do for the day. Maybe it was go to my job that was like down the road. So they were like, oh, I need to get to my place of employment. It's on the other side of town, so I need to catch the shuttle. The second part was walking to the bus stop where that specific shuttle would pick them up. Then it was checking an app. The University of Cincinnati had a shuttle tracking app where you could see where the bus was on its route and kind of estimate how long it would take to arrive. And then it was getting on the bus itself. So that's the content that the 4 videos were composed of.
And I want to, I guess, did it work? I suppose then is the, like,
Did it work?
Yeah, so what was people, I mean, did you get people on board then and, testing out the shuttle buses? Like, how did that go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the PI on the project, Matthew Schmidt at the University of Florida, it was his advisee at the time. We continue to work on this project. There's really not a lot of actual generalization research in the field of VR and autism, next to nothing. And the few papers that do present generalization are typically these very rigid, concrete skills, like did you look left and right when you cross the street? Josman's kind of work from I think the late 90s or early 2000s. Nobody else really does it. Majority of our research has been around the learner experience design process and prototyping around a design-based research framework. In the spring of 2019, with our second prototype, we did collect some generalization outcomes, but we didn't collect any kind of like far transfer outcomes. What we did find was that all participants were able to replicate the steps on campus with a similar number of prompts and supports. But that's as far as we got. And unfortunately, and this goes back to earlier, Matt is no longer at the University of Cincinnati. I'm no longer at the University of Cincinnati. The program director from Impact is no longer at the University of Cincinnati. So now we have a VR system that we spent years on that's not being used. So probably
I can see them. So I can see why you're saying very, very specific, not getting out anywhere, just exactly where you built it.
Yeah.
I guess that does raise interesting questions about, well, like I say the generalizability of everything we're doing. Maybe, I don't know, I suppose is it better for us to create incredibly general things that aren't locational specific, that then require people to do that extra cognitive step of applying their training to where they are, or just making it really easy to make stuff for the Cincinnati shuttle system?
My sort of thoughts on that, and something I noticed during my PhD program, is that all the literature seems to suggest, especially Sarah Parsons' work, or 2016 piece around like a conceptual literature review around authenticity in VR environments for autism. It's one of my favorite manuscripts in this line of research. And it all seems to suggest that realism is an important component in these systems. And all the research just says again and again and again, autistic people are concrete thinkers, and the training environments need to be relevant and applicable to their lives. But probably 90+% of VR environments are made of these pseudo-realistic environments that aren't actually relevant to the end users, that don't represent environments that they would ever actually go into. And then we are like, why isn't this working? But we're taking what are allegedly concrete thinkers, we're giving them an abstract scenario, and then we're trying to train them on skills that are further abstract. And then we act surprised when it doesn't work. It's just goofy.
Yeah, I suppose that's the next problem, given that if we're trying to replicate real things, the system requirements on making anything look even mildly not cartoonish, so basically beyond what we have right now. I suppose, I guess that's where your videos come in, isn't it? Then that is a video of the real world.
Yeah, unfortunately, while video modeling has been presented as the gold standard in autism training research for decades, it just doesn't work. It's too rigid. You can't provide a lot of variability to mirror the real world and flexibility like the real world. Like these videos don't have the bus arriving late. What happens then? Or what if the bus is full when you can't make a video like that? And there's advancements in technology and video editing where you can make like branching scenarios, like a choose your own adventure style thing. But it's not fully flexible to truly support the benefits that fully immersive VR systems are able to maintain.
And so, Gonzalo, have you said the same things then, as in your educational app? Like, how do they generalize?
I was thinking that probably one of the problems that Noah was talking about, the realism of the situations in the real environment, can be completed or probably can be improved using the VR cameras that appear, and then we can know where the students are fixing their eyes. And then we can redesign the systems, because we know in this social situation in the virtual environment where the students are focus their eyes. Then this information can be used to redesign this virtual environment. And in this sense, the problem that Noah was talking probably can be solved. In one of our research in this project, we designed a system to receive the information about where the student was focusing in this virtual environment. And then when we receive this information, we redesign the system and we change some avatars according to this information. Now we are preparing some paper in Spanish to some specific journal, and we talk about this topic and this way of solving the problem of realism in a virtual environment.
I see, because it's interesting then that you're saying it's just using, so you say gaze, because we have been trying similar things. I say within VR, admittedly, cased within the headsets, but the struggles we've been having is about how accurate those actually are. Like we've sort of been, you're able to vaguely track where people's heads are. We found, just based on like the line out of the middle of the screen. But with the sort of eye tracking headset, we found that the margin for error is so huge that how easily it's actually been able to use that. But maybe it's a good, I suppose, there's a way of, certainly as a function of UX, I suppose, isn't it? Seeing where people are actually paying attention and what things to concentrate on. It's probably better as a development tool than certainly anything more precise.
Yes, because when you make this type of system, or you develop this type of system, you can obtain the evolution of the position of the student, the eyes of the student during the interaction in this social environment. Therefore, when imagine that the teacher is talking to explain something, you can receive information about how the student is fixing their attention or not to this avatar. And then you can study the evolution of this attention to the different avatars, and then redesign to the next step the different avatars, the position, and the social situation. There is no research now in this type of situation, and here in Spain we are working in this line, using visual information included in the virtual environment.
That's the fact that's doing basically exciting, right? The trailblazers.
Thank you. Tammy has got a question next, I think.
Okay, so my question is probably directed at Elliot because he wrote the paper about participatory action research. And I just wondered what advice you have for new PhD students who want to get into this field and how they can potentially involve autistic individuals or neurodiverse people in the research, how to go about the process, and what things you would recommend someone starting the PhD to think about before they do their project.
Yeah, that's great. So it's that classic, what's the phrase, you know, that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, the second best time is now. I think the same applies for participatory, right? Especially, you know, if you're at the start of the PhD, I mean, that's almost, like I was saying, there are problems in terms of the money aspect of it. But, you know, if you're involved, can involve people right at the start, you know, then that can guide your whole project, which is almost sort of the, you know, the gold star like versions of these things. In terms of advice, I think it's almost, I guess, it's difficult not to sound too wishy-washy. It basically just sort of very generic things about almost like how you would treat participants generally, you know, in that it's not always going to run perfectly, right? You know, you have this beautiful group, you get all of these people together, for example, so you want to do it where you have a supervisory or like oversight committee or something, you know, and then you have this committee, you put them together, and then, you know, they can't agree on what the best thing is for you to do, right? Like one side, says, what we've done, like one side says, put your, you know, like demographic question there at the end, or the other side is saying, put it at the beginning. You know, so ultimately, you know, autistic people are not a monolith. You know, you're going to have disagreements, and then so a lot of it is going to be managing basically people. And you know, my advice would be just be happy with that, accept that, and you're going to be, you know, you're working with them. Again, you know, that's my key thrust is you want to meaningfully, you know, have this relationship with the people, hopefully pay them, you know, find some way to pay them. So, for example, I've had, you know, registered participants with a generous participation fee, so that, you know, you're not just exploiting their time, especially, you know, often it will be people who are already involved in a lot of research, you know, giving up their time for free, and that can grind a bit over time. So I'm afraid that feels a bit rambly, but I think those are sort of the key points or pieces of advice for new people.
Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you. So have you got any more questions today? Okay, if no one's got any more questions, I'll just pass you back to Tammy to wrap up.
Okay, so I suppose we'll end there since no one has any questions. So a very big thank you to our organizing committee for making this a possibility, and our authors and our editor-in-chief, Dr. Nigel Newbutt, for making this special issue a possibility. So we thank everyone for attending as well. And that's the end of our webinar. So thank you.